When we are in painful experiences, our brain is fired up. We're overwhelmed, right? We're confused. As humans, we don't like dissonance. We don't like when something isn't fitting. So we try to make it fit. But because we're overwhelmed and afraid and panicked and confused, the way we make that painful experience fit is inaccurate. When we're living our best version of ourselves, it's because we've gotten out of our way. And when we figure that out, it's like the whole world opens up. We open up ourselves, the world opens up for us, and that comes with that freedom to choose. I know that if I want to have fun the next day, if I want to be my best version of me, I am so highly disciplined about protecting my sleep. So that's just something practical that I embrace as a lifestyle choice. My brothers just were closer in age. Boys will be boys. They just saw me as a nuisance, not because I wasn't good enough, but because of their preferences at that time that literally had nothing to do with me.
Welcome to JOY², Live with Joy. This is the podcast where we get to explore the power of joy, purpose, passion, and fun, and how joy, when practiced intentionally, transforms how we live, work, and lead. I'm your host, Greg De Koker, and I believe that when you live with joy, everything gets better, and I mean everything. And this isn't just about feeling good. It's about unlocking joy as a resource, one that fuels better leadership, meaningful work, and thriving lives. Each week, we share the stories, the insights, and the sparks that ignite more joy, because joy is contagious, it's powerful, and it belongs to all of us. So lean in, stay curious, and let's create more joy together. This is JOY², brought to you by Essentia Group. Welcome back to the JOY² Live with Joy podcast, where we explore the hidden power of joy in leadership, work, and life. I'm your host, Greg De Koker, and today's conversation is going to be bold, honest, adventurous, and very alive. I met today's guest at the Toronto airport on our way to a retreat in Arizona a couple of years ago, and I remember thinking two things immediately. Number one is this airport is huge, and number two, I'm not quite sure it's big enough for Karen's energy. So Karen Goslin is pure joy, pure adventure, and pure authenticity. She's direct, kind, funny, fearless, and deeply committed to helping people transform their lives. And somewhere between talking about retreats and life, one of us mentioned the Foo Fighters, and I casually shared that my wife's boyfriend, or fake boyfriend, or wannabe boyfriend, is Dave Grohl, the lead singer. And without missing a beat, Karen said, "That's impossible because he's my boyfriend."
He's two-time.
So I know, exactly. I was like, what's going on here? There's lots of two-timing going on. And so clearly, we were meant to be friends. We were meant to connect. And before we kind of start the, our conversation, I just wanted to share a little bit more about Karen. So Karen Goslin holds a Master of Social Work from the University of Toronto and founded KG and Associates in 1998. She has since trademarked her method, the KG Accountable Therapy. Karen is passionate about guiding people toward clear, measurable transformation. She helps her clients see pain, addiction, chronic illness, loss, and trauma, not as life sentences, but as invitations toward change, invitations to ultimately own the joyful life they once believed was attainable. Her work creates brave and honest spaces that allow for the straight talk necessary for accountability and healing. She's the author of Yellow Paint, Learning to Live Again, has been featured in international publications, and speaks on stages around the world, teaching tools for breaking negative patterns, calming nervous systems, and turning pain into actionable resilience and expansion. Wow, that's amazing. So Karen, welcome to the JOY² podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I'm thrilled to see you again. And I just know that we're going to have a great conversation.
Oh, so excited, and I was so excited when not only did you say yes to being a guest on the podcast, but, you said yes to being more involved and being a founding sponsor of it. And I know how busy you are with all your adventures and your travel and your experiences and your business and your life. And I just wanted to start off by saying, why did you choose to be a founding sponsor of JOY²?
Well, I believe in you, and I echo what you were saying about our first meeting. There's a synergy. There was an energy. I don't know who was reflecting back to who, or we were both, but it's kind of magical when that happens when you meet somebody for the first time, and then you're like, oh yeah, I know about Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters and music and transformation and healing and kind of empowering people and it just seemed to me like we had a lot in common, that we thought of things in a similar way. And so when you reached out to me last year to explain this, JOY² project, I'm like, of course he's having a podcast program about joy. Like that just fit. Didn't scratch my head on that one at all. And it just fit. So I believe in you. I believe in what you're doing. We're fully aligned in tapping into our own joy and fully utilizing that joy to help people find their joy, and so I just believed in it full round. It was a bit of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I get goosebumps when you're saying that,
Mhm.
because I haven't heard you share that in that way, actually. So thank you, really,
Yeah,
for saying yes and being part of this. I'm really excited about getting the word out, right? And how can we intentionally create joy in our lives? I mean, starting with ourselves, right? And I think we often look at it as it's a result or an outcome or maybe a reward instead of like, what if we live with it? What if we lead with it? What if we work
right.
with it? So yeah, which is very exciting.
I
So
think the other interesting thing is because some people might just say, a podcast about the power of joy, like, period. But as soon as you
right,
add that, the exponent of the squared, that's
yeah.
what really stands out to me because it is that exponential
Mm.
growth and healing and power that we create within ourselves and with other people. It reminds me of that saying of like the total is greater than the sum of the parts, you know? And
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
just joy, period, it's joy squared. So like that exponential growth. That's what we really want to tap into.
You're right, and because it's great and it starts with us, but it really is about the power of joy, and joy's contagious, and it's like and I think, that's what we experienced when we first met. It was like, you're just beaming with joy. I mean, you're just like this energy, and I'm like, "Who is this?" And I was too, and I think and it was just like we just kept bouncing off each other, and it was just
I
it
think
was it
we
was
literally
almost
did
like
bounce off each other.
we literally did, I know, and it was like
The
it
chest pump,
felt
it
like
pierced them.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did.
We did,
You're right.
we
Oh my
did.
god, that's right. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. That's hilarious. And it was like I would it's almost like we were laughing so much, we probably missed half the conversation, but we didn't miss anything because we got the energy and we got the intent, and it was really special, to have that kind of connection with someone right from the get-go. So, it's just always as soon as I see you, as soon as I'm in your energy,
Yeah.
whether it's Zoom or in person, and in person's always,
Yeah,
preferred,
and
but
I don't know
Zoom's
if
in
you
a
remember
that's nice.
this, but that airport was shut down that morning. There was
Yes.
like an arrival plane that landed in the departure gates, and so for
Yes.
security measures, that whole airport was shut down that morning, but it was like it almost didn't matter. It's like, when we're living in that joyful place, it's like the problems, you know, the focus is more on kind of the joy than the problems, and I think that's part of what happened that morning as well.
That's right, because there were a lot of people that were worried about it. I connected and they're just like, "Are we gonna be able to leave? Is our flight gonna be able to leave?" And I was like, "I don't know." I mean, it's kind of it's out of my control, it's out of your control, and so it's like, why not just make the best of it? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. We could have easily
worrying
just
it's a
sat
good
there and
reminder,
frustrated each other, you know?
right? No, instead, we're like, I mean, it's just gonna add to the connection because we knew we weren't sitting next to each other, so all it was more bonus time with you.
That's right, that's right, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kinda
That
like,
was
well,
awesome.
okay, what's the alternative here rather than being frustrated? It's like, let's make use of some time that we're not gonna have on the plane, so it's a win.
And people just started drawing. I mean, it was incredible how, like, it started with you and me, then there's 3, then there's 4, then there's 5, and we had, like, a group of us that just kinda started all hanging out, and it was magical. It was very
Became a
fun.
party
So,
instead of like, a pity not a pity party, it's like a joy party.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. We're definitely joy champions, joy ambassadors. We're just, joy stormers. I don't know what what the
Yeah,
word is, but
all of that and
all of
more.
it. All of that and more, yeah. Well, I'd love to kinda talk about what does joy mean to you in your life right now?
So I was thinking about this because I knew you were going to ask me. And what I'm tapping into recently is that freedom to choose that when we're living our best version of ourselves, It's because we've gotten out of our way. And when we figure that out, it's like the whole world opens up. We open up ourselves, the world opens up for us, and that comes with that freedom to choose, to act with intention, to see no limits in what is possible, like true freedom. And then the second word that comes to mind is passion, right? Because as you step into your freedom, you uncover or discover passions of yours that truly like mean something to you, that gets you closer to what you really want in life. So it's to me a couple of those moving parts of like figuring out how we're getting in our own way and what to do about that so we're not hitting dead ends or running into obstacles as much. I mean, life isn't perfect, but are there some things that we can clear out? Because otherwise, that pathway to joy is blocked. But then what happens when you get over that part? You unleash that freedom to truly create the life that you really want. And that is, I don't know, that is joy.
I love it, and I think that's like it's such a beautiful exploration, and I love that you're so committed to helping people on that journey. Because I think most people don't know what they want too. That's another kind of part of it, and I think that can kind of block joy. And it doesn't mean you have to have a, like a. Some people get mired in purpose, and like, what's my purpose? And I always say, like, well, what if the starting point is just to like love your life? What
Mhm.
if that's just and again, like, because there's no downside to that.
Right.
Right? And
Right.
then maybe that might help you to find something more specific, but even if it doesn't, just loving your life and then the kind of the joy that you'll exude and how contagious it is, I mean, it just spreads, and I think
Right.
we need more of that. I
Right.
talk about, like, massive joy deficit. I think we're in
Right.
the middle of a massive
Right.
global
Oh,
joy deficit. What can we
yeah,
do to bring more joy?
I
Lift
know.
people up, bring
There is
people
so
up.
much going
Yeah.
on in the world that, yeah, I've definitely noticed another era of, global disenchantment. And if you look at some of the big negative eras in our world history, you can see that pattern. But I want to come back to what you just said a few minutes ago about that most people don't know what they want. That is something that I hear a lot in the client populations that I serve and in the clients' lives. And something interesting happens when we change the narratives and the stories and the thoughts that we have in our mind, because those negative or unrealistic thoughts will either block us or trick us into believing things. And so then the possibility of actually being able to land somewhere that is like, yes, that's what I really want, is less likely. So a lot when I show people for the first time our cognitive program, for example, and one of the steps is, "Yes, and here is where you identify what you want." They're like, "I can't do that," right? That's not I don't know what I want anymore. They've literally lost themselves in their lives, and it's disconnected them from themselves so greatly that they've literally lost track of what's important to them. So it is interesting that I think the preceding step to knowing what we really want is to be able to change those narratives and the stories we're telling ourselves, because that will trap us and definitely redirect us away from what we really want.
Well, it's interesting. It kind of ties into one of my questions, which is like, how do you remove those blocks? And maybe we'll start with you personally. Like, when
Mm.
something kind of shows up, right? I mean, there's something that's blocking joy. How do you kind of move to it, move through it, remove it? Like, what are some of the kind of things you do for you? And then we'll talk about kind of what you do for your clients as well.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of one and the same, It's like I
Right.
had the
Okay.
education and the training, and and then that combined with my personality set into motion, what tools I was going to use with clients when I started, opening my practice. But then life is happening on the outside of the business, and so when I figured out what I did to get out of my own way, then that circled back to refine the programs I was offering clients. But on a personal note, a big story I had been telling myself, for a long, long time, wasn't even aware of it for, many years, was that I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough. I didn't belong. People would leave me. People wouldn't include me. And as with most of us, it came from a series of events that happened growing up where I felt, in pain about. My 2 older brothers were 5 and 7 years older than me, 2 years apart from each other, and growing up in kind of the gender stereotypical '70s, right? So boys will be boys, girls will be girls, and they never included me. They never wanted to include me in any of their play. Like, this was when we played outside till it was dark, right? And it was like, "Yeah, I'm not involved," and then they had their neighborhood packs, and, "No, I don't belong there either," because, they, want the nagging sister, pestering sister. So unknown to me, that just planted in our neural pathways as it works. I'm not enough. I don't belong. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. I don't belong. All that stuff. And I took that story and embellished it and generalized it and projected it. And I rode what I call the aggressive side of the wound. So I overworked that story and would fight too hard, would do too much, would perfect everything in some like crazy bizarre loop of like if I'm perfect, maybe eventually I'll belong and I'll be good enough, right? And you
Right.
know, that
Yeah. No, I can relate to
backfired.
that.
uh,
I'm a recovered perfectionist as well. So.
right. So
Mm.
that backfired. I got sick.
Mm. Ah.
I where was pushing people away in relationships and ultimately lost my marriage. And there was a series of events around my illness, around the work that I was doing at the time. I also lost a pregnancy. And it was just a series of things, right? And that was my moment. Like after my marriage ended and my daughter was having her time with her father, I just, that's what happened for me at that rock bottom moment. And so the only way of getting out of my own way really at that point was to radically accept how I was contributing to losing joy in my life, how I was sabotaging, my performance, my achievements, where I was trying to find control, where I was actually losing control. And so we look at the top down tools because until I could intercept those triggering moments where potentially someone was questioning me or ignoring me or avoiding me, anything thematically similar to what I had originally experienced, I had to know it in the moment. So I'm very big on having these top down tools that change our thinking in the midst of that trigger. And it's hard to do, but with practice, it's possible. So it became a very active practice for me, especially if I was in threesomes, like, and with two other people who knew each other better. It was like, oh, no, no, this is where I start fighting and I start working hard to prove myself. And then they're like, wow, Karen, you're like a little too much. Um,
Jockeying for position,
yeah,
like you did with your brothers, right?
yeah. From the
Right.
bottom up, I did the work that literally mended my broken heart. And this is the power of depersonalizing our narratives,
Mm.
where really there was no big conspiracy against me the whole time. My
Right.
brothers just were closer in age. Boys will be boys. They just saw me as a nuisance, not because I wasn't good enough, but because of their preferences at that time that literally had nothing to do with me. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of other parts to that, but one key part of the bottom up is about depersonalizing our narratives.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
putting that together, unlocked, a zest for life. And even making
Mm.
sense of my divorce and neutralizing that and understanding what I brought in and what my ex-husband brought in a neutral way that just explains the narratives without so much blame and shame. So when
Wow.
you do this, get out of your own way in what you're thinking and mending your heart, that's when that's when I could step into my best life. I built my practice, I hired a business coach, I started traveling, I was consciously parenting my daughter, I changed
Mm.
friendships, and because you're just literally living from a different part of yourself.
Wow, I love that. You mentioned so many things in there, and one thing, the neutralizing is part of the neutralizing, realizing, and is I know depersonalizing your past is part of that. And is it realizing that a lot of the stories we've made up aren't even true?
Right.
Like, I mean, your brother, they weren't intentionally out to make your life hell or to even they weren't even trying to hurt you.
Right.
I know what they did, but it's like you kinda made up this story based on kinda what they said and did that, wasn't even true, and you carry that, and you even said what you it was the aggressive side of the wound. You really work the aggressive side of the wound. Yeah, so as part of it realizing that, yeah, I made that up. That's not even true.
Yeah.
Is that part of neutralizing it? Part of the process or
Well, it's needed because the reality is that for most of us, when we are in painful experiences, especially as children, when our brain is still developing, but even as adults or older teens, when we are in painful experiences, our brain is fired up. We're overwhelmed, right? We're confused. We're in pain. And as humans, we don't like dissonance. We don't like when something isn't fitting. So we try to make it fit. But because we're overwhelmed and afraid and panicked and confused, the way we make that painful experience fit is inaccurate. So and that's where a lot of the judgment comes in about ourselves or other people or all kinds of ways our brain can go in different directions. But we make it fit inaccurately. And then
like you
without
make it
being
fit into your false narrative? Sorry,
yeah,
like you make it fit
yeah.
into your false narrative, right? This thing you created, you're just like everything kind of is supporting this false narrative.
Well, it's that when we're in that painful place, because the resources and the capacity of our brain is lowered because we're overwhelmed and because we want to make it fit, like those two things clash. So when we want to make it fit, but we have limited resources, the outcome is that the way we make it fit will be inaccurate. And then if that's not bad enough, that we will then carry that forward, especially if it's a significant experience. So then what happens is the self-fulfilling prophecy that we will make other experiences fit because again, humans want to have that congruence rather than the dissonance. And that's more comfortable for us, even though it's wrong. Yeah, fits the story, you know. So that's the real danger of that we're all kind of guilty of simply because of the limited resources and needing to make it fit.
And so that's a like, I guess as far as removing those blocks, I mean, that is a are are there are there simple ways to do it? Like, can you kind of like realize that something maybe isn't congruent with who you are and there's something that's blocking joy and maybe it's a narrative? Like, are there some simple tools? Like, can you do some breathing exercises? At least, I mean, and I know not long term and you're focused on long term, but even in the moment, to remove those or move through those things that are blocking, like the overwhelm or the stress or the anxiety.
Well, in the moment, what's most important is that you recognize you're in that trigger. It's that paradigm. We can't change what we don't recognize. So we benefit from recognizing it. Um, the simple tool I developed was called the change program. But the cue is like, okay, notice my cues. Brain, body, and behavior change when we're triggered. The H is the honeymoon because very few of us can actually switch gears in the heat of the moment. It's kind of like what Mel Robbins called it was at the 15-second rule or something. So you step away and then you have to calm the brain. So breathing is one of those, but generally we want to either discharge the stress, soothe the stress, or distract from it. So here's what I do. Here's a little inside info. Because I ride the aggressive side of the wound and I'm prone to overdoing or oversaying something, my the adjustment to calm my brain is to bite the inside of my lip. Because as a fighter, and if I indulge the trigger, I will say things I regret. I will upset people I care about. And so we all have our tricks. That's my personal trick of what I chose as part of the A in the change. Do
And you're
not
literally biting your lip.
I'm
You're
literally
literally
yeah, I am
right. Okay.
literally because whatever you need to do to intercept that process has to be as big, if not bigger, than the trigger. So for any of us, whether we want to escape or fight or do a bit of both and be passive aggressive, it's so instant. So whatever you do to intercept has to override that temptation to react. So for me, I bite the inside of my lip. I do not say a word until I know that the first word out of my mouth is going to be the word I. I feel, I think, whatever those pieces are.
You're owning it, not blaming.
That's right. And while I'm biting my lip, I go through the other steps of the neutral fact. What do I know to be true? What do I really want? That's the magic, because whatever I say or do next should reflect the facts of the situation. That's where you're correcting the narrative, and is going to get me one step closer to not what I want, because I'm not that immediate gratifier of like, I'm going to tell the other person what they're doing wrong, but what I really want. And in that 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, some people say it's 20 minutes, but be sure that whatever when I release to talk, it's going to fit with those things. And it's powerful. But everybody has their own tricks, but that's an example of what I do.
Well, that's amazing. I love that. And do people that know you really well know, like, will they know you're in this? Like, will some of them know, like, oh, she's biting her lip. She's really thinking about it. I've said something that maybe has upset her, triggered her. Now you're going through your process. Will they know that?
Yeah, my daughter and I definitely practice like conscious family with like I messages, and she's like, "Well, I have my mother as a therapist," and it's like it's crazy, but we actually have found our way through in really really great parts of our life. The example that comes to mind where somebody didn't know is when I was practicing all of this post-divorce, and I remember being on the phone with my ex-husband, and I was practicing this, part of what we also call assertive delay, where you create that pause. And we were on the phone, and as you know, it can easily just, like, be ping-ponging back and forth, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna practice this." So I just stopped talking. And see, he was used to me being the fighter. And this was not a video call. So he was like, "Karen, are you still there? Like, did you hear what I had to say? Like, what do you think?" And when I unleashed my lips, I just said, "I did hear you. I'm just taking a moment to think about what I want to say next." And it was like, wow, the power of that was crazy. But he was surprised because when people are used to you being a certain way, they're thrown off, right? They're like, "What's going on?"
I love that. And you create that, it's really, you're creating that pause so that you can respond in a way that's responsible
That's
and really
right.
consistent with who you are and who you want to be, I guess, in that moment, not reacting in a way that maybe feeds the old narrative
That's
or the
right.
old wound.
That's right,
Yeah,
and there's
that's
lots of
beautiful.
different ways to do it, whether you're putting ice packs on your face or squeezing ice cubes or, screaming into a pillow or taking the breath or blowing out the breath, digging fingernails into palm, all kinds of different distracting, soothing, or discharging tools in that incredibly important second where your brain is firing up.
Wow, I love it. And does the biting your lip, like, is that part of it kind of get you into your body and out of your head? Does it kind of bring you kind of, because it with that sensation, and you mentioned kind of maybe putting your fingernail into your,
Yep,
into your hand or whatever, just because again, it's that awareness and it's
that's right.
kind of helps to move from this may not be supporting you in the moment into
Yeah.
something more heart centered or
That's right. It falls into the category of what we call, in our practice, the physical distractors. And it's not meant to be punishing. It's not meant to hurt you or other people or things. It is meant to be a neutral pathway that basically redirects the brain. And it's like, brain, instead of going over here, focus on this sensation. And there's something that chemically changes in the brain when we focus on the physicality of that sensation that just interrupts, and it's kind of like redirects that loop, like instead of going here, go here instead. And so yeah, it's important to note that it's not meant to be punishing or hurtful. It's almost like an invitation to the brain, like, say, "Hey, I have an idea." And yes, in those seconds, I'm literally doing, apart from stopping me to talk, I am fully embracing that sensation of what it feels like as my teeth bite into the inside of my lip.
Right. Wow, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. That's a very personal one too.
It is,
So,
isn't it?
yeah, no, it is. It's great. I love it. And so that's kind of on the side of removing and moving through kind of those things that block joy. And what about on the other side of it? Like, how do you intentionally create joy for yourself?
Well, I do a lot of things. So, because I had illness in the past and developed autoimmunity, I know that just from a practical point of view, I have to protect my daily routines, especially for sleep. With autoimmunity, there's a lot of sleep disorders that are associated. And so I know that if I want to have fun the next day, if I want to be my best version of me, I am so highly disciplined about protecting my sleep. So that's just something practical that I embrace as a lifestyle choice that without that would definitely, negate the joy. On a more like on a bigger way, it really is about for me, it's about traveling, my travel experiences every year. Every year I have an experience or an adventure that gets me out of my immediate environment, that takes me somewhere crazy good in the world to hear about how other people are living, to connect with animals, to connect with nature, to push the envelope, be like a part. Sorry, what's the word I'm thinking of? Beyond, like what I normally do. So it's that combination of just throwing myself into something completely new and fun and adventurous, but also just unleashes that freedom that I was talking about a few minutes ago.
I love that. And we can talk, I know you've done a lot of I kind of heard a lot of your stories. You've done a lot of really cool, amazing, things as well. And maybe before we do that, I'd love to hear how you kinda help your clients create or cultivate joy. I know we talked about removing the blocks, but again, on the other side of it, what are some of the things that you kind of help your clients
Yeah.
do to
Yeah,
create more
it's
joy
so
in their
important.
lives?
Yeah,
Live a joyful life,
that's right. I mean,
what you shared about.
honestly,
Mhm.
I love my clients. I meet beautiful humans every day that are stuck and are desperate to get unstuck and to find their own joy. So that mirrors back to me because I will often hear as the work evolves, decisions they've made, things they've done that they never thought were possible. And so I am so dedicated because of the evidence-based approaches I learned about in school and knowing how I got in out of my own way and tapped into my own joy. So I believe in it so passionately. So I start with a very clear assessment and I'm very, committed to this. I kind of call it the emotional x-ray. And so we live in a different world, right? Where people are more aware, of what their problems are. Clients will come to me and say, I'm having intimacy issues. No, they'll say, I'm having a problem in my relationship. And I think a lot of it has to do with me and my intimacy blocks because my father left our family when I was young. So they have half of it mapped out. My job, the tool I use is to go beyond those insights and to with them about what they can do about it. The tools are those top-down tools, self-care. So whether how you're eating, sleeping, exercising, leisuring, mechanical functioning, they call it, which is like, what can I do on any of those daily habits that is going to serve me better, that is possible before I even feel better? The change program is the basic tool of how and most of my clients, including myself, will do a 5-minute track every day because every day things happen that we didn't want, like, or expect. And so being able to neutralize those thoughts by how we adjust the stress in our brain and how we empower ourselves. There's what I call the bridge tool, which has a lot to do with calming the nervous system and lots of different tools to unpack there around radical acceptance and self-affirmations, those pieces. And then the tool at the bottom is really about visiting specific times in our life. We explore what happened, we reframe the narrative like you and I were talking about. But here's the third step that is often missed and is so critically important that once you reframe what happened to you, what are you going to land on specifically that you're going to use, right? So it's like finding an image that is evidence of that new narrative. And that has to be a go-to. So clients of mine will put images on their devices, their home screen, their lock screens. People that are walking around with, sunshine in a bottle or flowers in the sidewalk because just because we want to feel better, it won't happen automatically. So
Are these
when
breadcrumbs? Like, are these kinda like those reminders, those breadcrumbs? Maybe these are even
yeah,
like loaves of bread. These are those things that,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, the
bigger,
breadcrumbs.
bigger than a
Because
crumb,
think of
right?
how many times a day, and unfortunately or fortunate, however you look at it, we look at our home screen or our lock screen. And then I will even have people put captions. And there's three different types of those types of landing points where we land because we reframed our past. But those are the daily tools because it's like every couple of minutes, every couple of hours, we need to remind our brain, yeah, I'm not in that dark cloud. I'm in the sunshine. I'm not dying on the cement. I got a flower here in my sidewalk. But it somehow has a very specific, special meaning that is a result of what we've reframed because old school psychotherapy was like, unpack your past. And over time, people felt better. But we live in a different world. So for me, it's always big about landing somewhere specifically that is a daily reminder of how we've reframed our past.
And so it really kind of helps prevent going back down the rabbit hole. It's that reminder that, hey, you've rewritten the story. This is what's true. This is what's empowering. This is what you really believe,
That's right.
you
It's
know?
like there's a new story in town and it isn't, you're not faking it. You're not faking it. You're like, okay, I got to try to believe this. It is this product of what we've done the deep dive on and unpacked it all and corrected it that it actually isn't just like something that, try to think of it this way. It's like, no, you've done the work. You've unpacked it. You've reframed it. This is the result of it. So it's that ability to hold yourself accountable because you've done that work and it landed somewhere that's going to truly, as we're talking about joy, truly going to be an integral part of you finding the joy in your life that you deserve.
I love it. It's like your emotional X-ray and the change method. It really is like transformation with a blueprint. It's not just insights. Hey, this is great. We unpack this. It's like, okay, now what are we going to do with those? What can we do to actually make a difference? Like these clues, these breadcrumbs, whatever you want to call it, those reminders.
Yeah,
So
got it.
neutralizing,
You got it. It
the
all
old
it all
stories.
builds. It all builds.
Yeah,
Because if you can bite your tongue in the middle of a problem, argument, yeah, there you can go to sleep at the right time because your brain is refreshed the next day, and you have some daily reminder of where you've been and how you corrected that. Like to me, I call it like the head and the heart tools. When those go together, we have the real package that we need to live that joyful life.
yeah. I've always said like, I mean, our head is a powerful, our brain is incredibly powerful, and it doesn't always tell us the truth. Sometimes those thoughts pop into our head, and sometimes we think of those, including myself. Like,
Oh
I
yeah,
have to constantly remind myself, if it's an old story that like that's not true. That's not, like thanks for sharing, but that's not true, or however we want to,
yeah,
you know, kind of connect with those. And
yeah.
it's just like our bodies are incapable of lying. I've always, kind of believed that. And our heads, we can rationalize anything any way we want. So the head heart thing, I think, is a beautiful way to kind of describe it. I don't know if that's exactly what you meant, but it's what kind of popped into my head
Well,
when you shared that.
I think I read somewhere years ago that the longest foot in the world was between the head and the heart, you know? And whether our heart is aching to love, but our brain is noisy, or our head, we can logically make sense of something, but yet our heart is still breaking. So I kind of feel like they both need attention in correcting the thoughts and in mending the heart. And then it's like the thought's gonna help the brain, the blood in the heart, the clarified blood in the heart kinda helps clarify the thinking. So they kinda go hand in hand.
I love it. It's like with with all everything you've gone through on your journey and your path and your healing journey, and then everything you've learned with your education, right? And being a psychotherapist. Like, you seem like it's not about teaching the theory. It's like, how can I leverage that to have real conversations and create real insights and back it up with some real tools that people can take action on
Oh,
so that they're
definitely. Yeah,
not in those depths of despair and they're not suffering. Like there's so much suffering in
that's
this
right.
world, and
There
I've
is,
really gotten
there
present
is.
for that.
My measuring stick
Yeah.
at the end of sessions are like, you know, "So, do you know what you're gonna try or do differently when you wake up tomorrow morning?" Most of the
Yes,
time they
right.
will, and if they go, "No, I forgot," I'm like, "Okay, hold on a second. Don't open that door.
Mhm.
Let's hash something out." Because
Mhm.
as
So they have something.
Yeah, exactly, and it's
Yeah.
because as much as we try, and you probably understand this, that our past never evaporates. Like, those triggers will continue to happen. When we do the work, the U-turn is shorter and then invites that joy. But our past never evaporate and our days are imperfect. And some of those imperfections of the day will overlap with where our heart is breaking. So this comes with no expectation, even for me. It's like when I realized that, my brothers not including me had nothing to do with me. Um, Even though I did that work, it's like there's still sensitivities in certain areas because of our history, but we recognize them sooner, we intercept them more effectively, and then that lays the pathway to that joy. So, we can't be discouraged that, like, how do I fix this or how do I make this go away? It doesn't go away, but our relationship to it changes.
It's kinda like when the trigger happens, and they will, maybe you don't react, maybe then you're responding. You've got the tools to kinda pause, reflect, neutralize, depersonalize,
That's right.
some of the things that you mentioned.
That's right.
And and then you're getting triggered probably less and to a less of a degree as well, the more you kinda practice it and, and
That's
do
right.
that.
Because the opposite is true. The more we ignore it, and this is what we talk about in the
Mm.
book, those invitations to grow will get more serious, right? So for me, it may have started with, clinging to friends growing up and being a straight A student. And by the time I hit rock bottom, a whole lot more crap had happened. Or the opposite is true. So by the time I, initially start indulging that wound by, you know, clinging to friends and overdoing and becoming that straight A student. And, by the time I finally woke up I was sick. My marriage was crumbling. So the opposite is true in the sense of like when we get out of our way, we're closer to joy. But it's okay. Like if we don't figure this out, the universe will keep telling us and kind of pointing things out to us in a more severe way. And for those of us who take a moment to wake up and think about what this could all mean and stop blaming everybody and stop blaming ourselves and just step into that zone of like, how did I get here? You know, how on earth did I get here?
And you mentioned something too about, your about your brothers not kind of doing anything intentionally. It's like and I what came to my mind is, something that I heard, from, a mutual friend and coach, Hina Khan, who said, like, what did she say? "What other people think of us," and I've heard this in other
Mhm.
places as well, "What other people think of us is none of our business."
Yeah, yeah,
To say that someone who's suffering, that may not land, right? It's kinda like maybe you need to kind of unpack that and realize that, hey, they were just living their lives. They were just being boys. They were older. They wanted to hang out with other boys, not their sister who is, 5 or 7 years younger. Um, but and so once you kind of unpack it, then it kind of makes sense. But just to hear some of those statements, like what we resist persists. That was another thing that I thought of when you're, just sharing that recent story, right? I mean, it's not just about avoiding it. That's not going to help because it will keep persisting and you will get those kind of that little tap on the shoulder, or maybe it's a, punch in the side or whatever it
yeah,
is. It's a little
exactly.
bit
I
more
know. Yeah, it
severe.
gets more severe.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Right.
I think you're touching up on
Mm,
something that's really important.
mm,
Because when we personalize something, it's easy to think that people are thinking about us and jumping to wrong conclusions about us. I call this, or in DBT, we call it the spotlighting effect, right? Where we start to believe
right.
in our wounded self that we're the only ones on stage and that the rest of the world is in the audience, and they're all at the edge of their seats going, "Oh, what's Karen or what's Greg gonna do next?"
Right.
And we've got one spotlight over us when really everybody's on stage, multiple spotlights, and
Mhm.
people are wrapped up in their own stories. And so when people aren't thinking about us, it doesn't mean that we don't matter. It just means that that extra hypervigilance of like doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, and we ruminate on, oh, why did I say that? I should have said that. They probably think that. Really, really will like sink their teeth into us and get us off track. And so it isn't that people don't care or that we're not important. It truly means that we are overthinking how much people are judging us, and that that's a direct projection of not feeling good enough ourselves that we're laying on to other people. And that's where a lot of interrelationship problems happen, because of that sensitivity.
Well, I love that. There's tons and tons to unpack. I love all these different ideas and tools, and I love how you think, and I love how you support your clients and your friends, and even you, right? First, and kind of what you do for you. It's really, it's amazing. I love hearing all this. I love it if you could share kind of a moment, in your life or your career where you just experienced total, undeniable, kind of full body joy. And I know you have hundreds of them. We could do a whole
No,
separate conversation on that.
but I just want to preface this before I say this in the fact that, and I appreciate all of your compliments and asking these, thought provoking questions, but there's nothing different about me. There is nothing special. There is nothing different. I woke up and that was important. And I built tools that I knew would serve me every day and helps my clients and teaching other therapists this method as well. Everybody will have their own way of doing it. That was my version. What I know helps. But and the fact that I can do it, I know anybody can. So, it's that idea that this is my version of what I did and other people will have their own version. So, I have some recipes and tools, but there's really nothing that is different about me. If I could do it, anybody can. And to go from rock bottom to where I am now, I know it's possible and it's possible for anybody.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
knew you were
Thank
gonna
you for
ask me
saying
this
that.
question, and so I have many to choose from, but I would tell you, and I think I wrote to you about this. When my daughter
Mhm.
turned 18, we were on a
Yeah.
6-week trip in Asia that summer, and part of what we did with National Geographic when we traveled with them was to do giving back, parts of the trip. So, it just so happened it fell on her birthday. I don't even think we planned it that way. It just, when some things happen, they're like, "Oh, incredible when it happened this way." We were heading out of Hanoi for about 2 hours into the rural parts of the country where we were sponsoring female agriculturists. So, we met our client that we were, supporting. She taught us how to make, like, the sweet rolls, and she showed us the animals she had in her business of what she was trying to do to keep, support her family. But it was something about being in this completely remote village. The word came out that 2 white women were in the village. The children came first. So we spent like the better part of the day, fishing, flying kites. There's this amazing picture of me kind of running down the dirt road with a kite behind me and a little girl beside me and flying her own kite. My daughter's a big swimmer. She taught the kids how to swim. And then the mothers are like, okay, where are our kids? Who are these ladies? And had a really ah, powerful conversation or National Geographic person translated. And out in the middle of this place, the women were facing the same issues that a lot of women around the world face in terms of domestic violence and alcoholism, and terrible conflicts with their partners. And then if that wasn't enough, the chief of the village came and sat with us. Oh, Greg, it was just, I mean, I cried tears of joy for like hours after we drove away. The chief sat with my daughter and I and our translator about just trying to understand how crazy the world is and what happened, with communism and the world wars and the Vietnam War and how that all played out and what the differences were in our views and our memories and our perspectives, but in such a loving way that it was really like humans coming together in such a magical way to like try to make sense of their perspectives and the world around us. And And then as we drove away and we had a birthday cake for my daughter and everything, and there's an amazing picture of her sitting with these kids. And the I'm gonna get choked up, but like the National Geographic person said, because of the industrialization and the economy in Vietnam, that probably within 2 to 5 years that village won't even be there. And then here's one more piece of this, and I'm like, What's gonna happen to all those people?" That Christmas, out of the blue, we get a little envelope from Vietnam, and it's our client, and it's a picture of the pig they had with the litter of piglets. And the note said, "We named one of the piglets after your daughter." So there was like a little piglet in Vietnam named Madeline. But yeah, it was honestly, um, that's one example of many where when you're living in your joy, that's where the exponential happens, right, Greg? Because it's like it would have been enough for me to like, yeah, we had a great time in Vietnam, but those drop, human moments, you couldn't put a price on, you couldn't measure. You literally cannot measure what happened to us that day.
Well, and it wasn't just one thing, it was the whole day. I mean, one of those things would have been incredible enough,
Oh
but
yeah.
you stack them all together, and it sounds like for you, it was you and your daughter just connecting with
Yeah.
people. Like, these are just real people living their lives
That's
like
right.
us, right? And going through some of the same stuff,
Oh yeah.
and just being there and being present
Unforgettable.
to all that.
Unforgettable.
Oh,
And I
man,
would
I
just
love
say
that.
that
Those
all the
photos.
work I did on
Mm.
myself
Mm.
made that possible. Made it possible for us
Wow.
to go over there for the amount of time and to hire, people that could support, the dreams that we had, right? That dreaming. I mean, that was that all everything I had done in my own work and in my own history, like,
Oh,
that
yeah.
that made it possible to make that dream come true
Wow.
that day.
Wow, I love that. There's so much gold in there, and just, between you connecting with your daughter and creating that lifetime experience and being able to share that and give that and receive that. There's so many different things you could look into. Wow, I know you have 100 of those examples, so we'll dive into some other ones another in
Yeah,
another
no
interview, but
problem,
yeah,
no problem, but
thank
it's
you for
like,
sharing that. Oh
yeah,
my
it wa
gosh.
it was unforgettable, but
Mm.
it's that idea of, like, whatever your dreams are, because when you're living your best version, you do invite more joy into your life, and then, like, honestly, the possibilities are endless. It's not just about money, it's not just about what you're doing, it's really about how you're feeling those moments, right? It's the feelings we had meeting these wonderful people and having these exchanges and just opening our hearts to how they were experiencing the world. Anyways, all of those
It's
pieces.
and you talked about tears of joy, and I'm now calling tears of joy streaming,
Oh, joy
and
streaming?
yeah, it just kinda came to me when I was having some tears of joy in a conversation, and it just I was like, "Yeah, I'm joy streaming now."
You're
And it was
turning it
just like
into a
it just
verb
felt.
where joy becomes a verb. I love it.
Yes, I know. It's like joy it up. I know, I was trying to think of all these different ways to kind of, yeah, create some different expressions, but I think just being present, to that, and being intentional with it. I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of it too,
And the
not just looking
flow,
at
right?
joy
The
as.
streams of
Yeah,
the flow of the streams, it's like, yeah, it's
yeah,
like, it's just, yeah.
and letting it flow and letting it come out, and I think, not just looking at joy as a reward. Hey, if I, meet this goal, meet the metric, hit the milestone, whatever that is, it's not just looking at it as a result or a reward like we typically do, but how can we be intentional with it? Like we started talking about at the beginning, of our
Yeah.
conversation. So how can we lead with joy, work with joy, live with joy intentionally,
Yeah, and then
right
be
on
open
purpose?
to whatever else happens that we didn't plan,
Yeah.
Like, none of that was planned that day. I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh, that's right, we're gonna go see our client and see what her farm is all about," you know? But,
And
it's
just yeah, and you never would have planned it. That wasn't even in the plan. Probably most of that day wasn't planned, right? It just unfolded.
well, we will invite other opportunities, and, there may be other people who aren't stepping into their joy that are in the exact same locations, but their experience is so different, All kinds of things could oh, 2 hours, that's too long of a drive, or, they could have missed all of it. But when we're truly opening our hearts and minds, we will take an experience and just blow it up and live it fully. And that's really what I was saying at the beginning around the limitless amount of space where joy lives. And how we approach these situations can be so different based on what we're feeling at the time. Kinda back to the airport story when I think about it, you know, because it was like we could have been upset with the stoppage and the closure. It was like, "Oh, well, this will be a great opportunity to get to know each other better."
Exactly. We could be upset about the 2-hour drive, be upset about the 2-hour
Yeah.
delay,
Oh,
or it is
yeah.
what it is. It's out of our control. And I know, so I never really thought I was controlling until, I did kind of more work on myself, and I realized that, yeah, I kind of do like to control things. And so now I consciously try to kind of let that go, because, as someone explained, and as I've read and researched, and again through therapy and coaching and lots of different programs and personal development. I'm a human connection junkie like you are, and a personal development junkie like you are.
Yeah.
It's like when you're gripping so tightly, you're not open to receiving. And it's also hard to kind of give too, because your hands are just, and again, like the physical manifestation of it was just an interesting kind of analogy that it's kind of stuck with me to, like,
Oh, yeah.
gripping tightly, if you kind of let go and you're just kind of touching lightly on those things, and you're not trying to control things, it does let things flow and unfold
Yeah.
in a
I call
in a
that the
natural,
trick
joyful
one
way.
of the tricks of the wounded self, right? That we will trick ourselves into believing that controlling will give us more control when it actually leaves us with less control. We
And
have
more stress.
Yeah, we have more
Yeah.
control by letting it go, by being open.
Yes. You haven't heard it explained that way, but I love
Yeah,
that.
the
That's
trick of is
cool.
yeah, there's many weapons and tricks the wounded self has, but that's one of them, yeah. Control more to actually end up controlling less.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, before we kind of wrap up, kind of, for those listening to our conversation, like, what do you hope that they feel,
Mhm.
after listening to this?
Well, more than anything, I want your listeners and your audience to know that joy is possible for them. On a more serious note, right, it's that we will have painful experiences, whether it's trauma, loss, abandonment, betrayal, illness. There are some real life experiences of pain that will cause us to lose hope or give up or fight too hard, to medicate, do all kinds of different ways we can get lost. So, more than anything, I want your listeners to understand the universal human experiences of that. We obviously experience it in different degrees, but that it is possible to work through that, to come out on the other side, to maybe, discover a part of yourself or part of other people or part of life that you didn't see before or was beyond your reach. There's different tools, there's different steps to follow that you can truly hold yourself accountable to creating the kind of life you want from wherever place you start. But that the wake ups of the successful, painful experiences, the invitations within that to wake up are real. So find a supportive person who can sit with you in that to figure that out.
Wow, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. That's beautiful, Karen. I've always said I think everyone should have at least one person in their lives that they can share everything with.
Mhm.
The good, the bad, and the ugly,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't matter who that person is, just, to have that person is really special. So yeah, that's a beautiful way to say that. And so for anyone listening who wants to learn more about your work, connect with you, maybe book their own emotional x-ray, where can they find you? And I'll put your information. I'll tag you as
Sure.
well.
Yeah. So,
Where can they
yeah. So, our KG Associates, where we support clients and therapists in the KG accountable therapy methods, we are at KarenRSW.com. If they want to learn more about the book or where I'm speaking or places I'm writing, I now have a yellow paint a monthly column. It's KarenGoslinSpeaks.com. So we have those two brands going. They're related but separate at the same time. And check me out on all the platforms. You'll see a lot in the social media content of where I'm speaking and what I'm thinking about and what's relevant for that particular day.
Wow, I love it. Well, Karen, thank you for being here. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for your boldness. Thank you for your humility. Thanks for providing, our listeners and me, with hope and just knowing that there are ways and there are ways to kind of move from suffering and pain and trauma, out of it. Anything's possible. Um, Thanks for interrupting pain with love. I thought, it kind of popped into my head,
Right.
and and thanks for reminding us that joy isn't accidental. Like it's accountable to use kind of, one of your words and to take responsibility for it. And I really appreciate you as a founding sponsor. And not only as a founding sponsor, but really as a colleague and a friend who's deeply committed to helping people become the best versions of themselves and go even higher and live that joyful life. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you
What
really
a
for
great
being here.
summary. Thanks so much for having me. And
Hmm.
I wish you the best of luck on your new podcast platform and, yeah, spreading the joy and unpacking joy and figuring out where it exists and where to get, how to get to it and how to find it and live it. So, yeah, all the best of luck for you.
I love it. And, I just want to kind of remind people that if, today's conversation, helped you see more clearly, helped you with some ideas, gave you some hope, gave you some joy, right? Then we're doing exactly what this podcast was created to do. And until next time, everyone keep choosing to live, work, and lead with more joy on purpose and then share it because joy is contagious and we need more joy in the world.
Right.
Cheers. Thanks for spending this time with us on JOY², where joy multiplies and everything gets better. Remember, joy isn't just something you feel, it's something you create and it's something you pass on. If this conversation sparks something in you, share it because joy is contagious. What we're building here is bigger than a podcast, it's a reminder and a movement that how we live, work, and lead truly matters. Until next time, live with joy, lead with purpose, and never forget to have fun. Keep choosing joy, squared. And if you're enjoying the journey, we'd be grateful if you subscribe, like, and share Joy Squared so the ripple keeps spreading.